think it should be working now. If you can just let me know. Yes, no, maybe. Okay, perfect. Sorry. I did the same thing I did the last time. Okay, awesome. Thank you for letting me know and being patient through that. So let me start again. So I lost my grandmother a couple of weeks ago, and I ended up going through this really intense process of feelings that I really wasn't kind of expecting. Of course, I was upset to lose my grandmother, but we knew it was coming, and she was older, and I just ended up having this explosion of feelings that I think the grief kind of has that ability to tap into things that maybe are dwelling inside that you haven't processed. I actually had some like family stuff come up that I hadn't processed yet that were kind of amplified with the whole process of the funeral, etc. Um, and please feel free as I go through this to ask questions. I'd love for it to be interactive. Um, it'll just help guide the conversation. So I would love that. So after I got through the process that I'm going to kind of talk about with you today, because I feel like it helps to actually have like an example of what that looks like instead of just telling you you need to feel your feelings. Like I can actually now walk you through what that actually looked like for me. But once I got through it, I thought, as I always do, could this possibly help anybody else? And I thought that it could. So that's why I'm here sharing this morning. So, the very first thing that came up for me is after her passing and after finding out, I actually found myself telling myself that she was 96 years old and this was bound to happen. And we knew that she was sick and we had been given a time frame for her. And so that I shouldn't be feeling sad about it. And I think that this is probably really common for people to immediately try to shut down their feelings because they don't feel justified in them. And if you go back to early childhood, how many times were you told not to cry, to not be angry, don't use that tone with me? All of those were expressions of feelings that we were going through and we were shut down, or at least I know I was. I don't know if all of you were, but I think it was probably pretty common to just kind of shut them down. Yeah. Um, not and I think it's just this like normal thing and I don't know why, because why don't we want them to be able to express their feelings in a safe environment? You're the safe one. Your parents are your safe ones, right? And this was actually projected back to me at the wake. My parents are divorced, but my mother always remained really close with my grandmother. I actually think that she considered her one of her best friends. So when my mother walked in, she was upset, rightfully so. She just lost one of her best friends. And as she approached my father to say she was sorry, I heard him say, Barbie, she was 96 years old. We weren't going to have her forever. And that was that immediate shutdown of you should not be feeling these emotions right now, so just shut them down. um which of course felt like a dagger going right into my chest. It really upset me, but I just realized like that's how I grew up, with this like non-expression of emotion. My grandmother was very much that way. She was not a cold woman, but she was very stoic. And my cousin actually talked about that in his eulogy, about how she never showed anybody what she was feeling, and he was talking about it in this really positive way, and I was like, no, no, this is not what I want for at least my kids and the future generation coming up. So my first thing to you is, I don't care what it is. I don't care if you feel like there's no way on earth you should be feeling this. You're feeling it. And if you accept that, then you can work through it and you can get beyond it. But if you don't, the feeling doesn't go away, it just gets stuffed down. So, number one, just accept that you're feeling something and that you have the right to process it. And I actually remember myself saying to myself out loud, you're allowed to be sad that you lost your grandmother, that she's not here with you anymore, even if you knew it was coming. So a couple of days later, I woke up and I was in this state that I can't even describe to you how painful it was. And this is the part where I think it all just kind of like came up and bubbled up out of me. I sat down for my morning meditation and I immediately jumped into all the things that I know help you process your emotions. But I made a mistake here because I didn't actually allow myself to feel it first. I didn't sit with it. So I tried some tapping and it didn't work. If you don't know what tapping is, it's something I think I'm going to offer out to you guys in another Sunday morning session. It's something that helps you process your emotions. I did a little bit of free writing about how lonely I felt, and that it was like this pure, like I am all alone and no one loves me feeling, which is really kind of bizarre. Um, Even when my next step was to reach out to all of you in the group and tell you all that I was struggling, and I was doing all these things to try to, I guess, make this pain go away, right? None of it really worked until I sat with it for a little while. Yeah, tapping is really, really helpful. And I have had it be very successful, but in that moment, I think the emotions were just so raw and so intense that there was just no way that these exercises were going to work at that moment. So I ended up for like the next 2 hours sobbing my eyes out. I mean, to the point that I was like nauseous. I thought I was going to be sick. And it was just this like grief and this pure, just I don't even know how to describe it, coming angst coming out of me. And I sat by myself, and then the brain starts to go, right? So I started to think about how I was a failure in business and I should quit my business because there was no way I was ever going to make it. And I went through at least 45 minutes to an hour of, I need to find a real job. I am never going to make this work. It just like that, those feelings just get in there and they really mess with you, those hard feelings. So I just wrote it out. I just sat with it and I just bawled my eyes out by myself. And I didn't do anything else. I just laid in bed and I just cried for at least 2 hours. Then the time came for me to go to work. So I had to pull myself together and I went to work. And I got to my first dog walking and I cried through the whole first one. Then something happened for the second one. It was like I had felt this feeling enough. Like I had gone through the physical sensations of this feeling. So it started to turn around a little bit here. I still had those like really awful thoughts about like being a failure. And then on top of it, I started to beat myself up because I was like, you've, oh, thank you, Suchi. If I can help somebody else, and really like why I'm telling you all this, because I didn't consciously go through any of this process. I wasn't like, okay, this is what I should do next. But I knew enough that it was kind of operating behind the scenes subconsciously for me. So I'm hoping that by offering this to you, it'll be in there when you go through something. Maybe your subconscious will take over and help you through. So I started to beat myself up about, manifesting is all about maintaining your high vibe status. And I was like, look what you've done. You've ruined everything. Like you've taken all of the work that you've done since the beginning of the year and you've thrown it all away. And now nothing good is ever going to happen for you. I mean, these were legitimately the thoughts going through my head. Yeah. Thanks, Jen. It was a beautiful release. It ended up being a very beautiful release. So I got in my head, and fortunately, because I was in the mode of walking, I was out. I had a dog with me, but I was alone. It was silent. I was quiet. This is always the place where I can connect the most with my intuition or guides or spirit, whatever. I got this very clear message that said, this is exactly what you're supposed to be doing. You haven't messed anything up. You're just expressing your emotions and you're getting them out of you, which is precisely what you should be doing. So that made me feel a little bit better. My next thought kind of went to, isn't it ironic that the process of grieving for my grandmother has led me through this enormous emotional release for a woman who actually never showed her emotions. And I actually kind of got the message that I maybe inherited some of her unprocessed emotions at the time of her death, and um, I was being I was gifted the opportunity to help her process some of those, but that's another conversation for another day if you're interested. Um, so it started to get better through this process, but when I look back, I think, oh my God, like that, those feelings messed so much with my head, right? And I ended up like being really gentle with myself. I went through the rest of my workday and I was okay. I came home, I climbed into bed for the rest of the day and I just took it really easy and I gave myself the space. I cried a whole bunch more that afternoon. I still had some more to get out. Um, it was, the messages were coming in, and eventually I was able to actually believe that people were caring about me and loving me, which for some reason in the morning your messages started rolling in. I had to stop looking at them after a certain amount of time because I just was in such a bad place that I couldn't even accept that these were all even real. I was actually denying the love that was coming my way and saying, nope, not this is, you're all just saying this. None of you actually mean it. So I thought to myself when I got through that, you know how to process emotions. You've studied this stuff. You know exactly the things to do and how to help, and you know the states that you can get into, and look at what you just went through. Imagine someone who doesn't have any of the tools to be able to get through this. And it makes sense why people can get so stuck in these places, and it broke my heart a little bit to think about that. Um, so that's why I'm here today. And I just want to, I wrote some notes down because I knew that I would kind of get caught up in all of this. So I just want to make sure I'm covering everything. Yeah, I think so. So, back to some of the ways that you can release some of those feelings, you have to sit through it. And okay, so I do want to go down this path. When we come up against those feelings that are awful, that hurt, or make us super angry, we don't want to feel those, right? No one wants to feel that. So that usually comes the point when we decide to numb them or ignore them. So in comes the drink, or, the drugs, the shopping, the sex, the whatever, right? Just take my mind away from it. I don't want to deal with this. This is way too painful. And unfortunately, when you do that, it just stays inside. It just gets stuck and it like lingers, and it affects you. It affects the things that you do. It affects the thoughts that you have. And as painful as it is, just taking that time to sit through it and go through it is going to help you in the long run. It's going to be really, really painful during that time, but it's going to allow you to move forward without it, without carrying it. And so then once you kind of sit with it long enough for it to start to feel better, and you will, like it'll all of a sudden, that pain that you were feeling that you thought would never, ever, ever go away will all of a sudden dissipate. It will just not be as painful as it was 2 minutes ago. And then you can get to the point where you can pull in, journaling is a really great way. I will actually, I went through this process yesterday. I'm still in my head about this business stuff, and I wrote in my journal yesterday about how I just don't know if I have it in me to keep doing this. It's like so hard, and I don't know if I can make it work. And all of a sudden, in the path of my writing, it all of a sudden switched to the other side, which was really interesting. And it was like, but what about that life that you've dreamed of? Are you ready to let that go? Are you ready to throw all of the work you've done up till this point away? So, anyway, journaling can be very magical if you let it. The tapping, crying, like physically get it out of your body, punching something if you're really angry. As long as you're in a safe container, a safe space, go at it. I've had a coach recommend to me an anger practice in which I put on a Limp Bizkit song. I allow myself one song. I have a punching bag. I put those gloves on and I just beat the hell out of it for one whole song. And then as soon as the song's over, the practice is over. And it is unbelievable the amount of repressed anger that will come out in those sessions. But that stuff's living in your body. So you got to let it out, right? Anybody have any questions? Just give it a second. See if you, I'm an open book. So I welcome any questions that you have. My numbing agent of choice was alcohol. And so I would find myself reaching for that glass of wine every time there was an intense emotion, or maybe not even so intense, any kind of emotion. Thank you, Amy. Yeah, so it was kind of like once I set that aside and I stopped using alcohol, period, I had no choice but to feel all those feelings. And it was through that process. So one sec, Suchi, and I'll definitely answer that. It was through that process that I realized just how important it was to actually get through these feelings. So Suchi asked, how long do you expect these feelings to stay? She resonates with this. So do you know that the physical sensation only, the physical sensation of an emotion takes 90 seconds to pass? 90 seconds and the physical emotion is, the physical sensation of an emotion is gone. What lasts and stays with us is the thought and the attachment to the thoughts that we have about that feeling. Yeah, it's crazy, right? It's so your thoughts then attach themselves to whatever you're feeling at this moment, and they go back in memory and they look for all of the other times that you felt this. That's what comes and floods you for a really long time. So the physical sensation, I'm not really sure. Like, I think it depends. I think it depends on how strong it is. I had those really, really, really severely intense feelings for a couple of hours. Would they have gone on longer if I didn't have to pull myself together and go to work? Absolutely. I was not done processing, as evidenced by me coming home and spending the rest of the day in bed. But the thing is, we don't allow ourselves that time always to just climb into bed and be sad and cry. Like, my family came in and checked on me, and I was like, listen, I'm okay. I love you. I just need this today. I just need to take this time today. Some of us, I understand, may not have the benefit of that, but hopefully you have some kind of a support system where you can allow yourself this. But it starts with you. You have to tell yourself you're worthy of taking care of yourself. You have to allow yourself the time to process it. If you don't, if you keep pushing it away and ignoring it, and I've got this stuff to do and I have to work and I have the kids to take care of, it's going to take a lot longer. So my advice is, if you can, give yourself the grace to set everything else aside and focus on this. Because in the long run, it's going to take a lot less time if you give yourself that time than if you try to work through it, push through it, do all the normal stuff that you do. It's just going to sit in the background. I find that oftentimes when I'm really, really tired and I know I have chores to do, and I argue with myself all afternoon about it, and then the day is gone and I haven't gotten it done. But if I had just taken like a 30-minute nap, I probably would have been all set to go ahead and do the chores after that. If you pushed it down for so long where you typically dissociate, how do you actually bring up the feelings without going through a trauma to bring it out? Yeah, so I've certainly gone through this. I will tell you for myself, I have not done this work alone, and I think that it can be really tricky to do that work alone. I've used coaches, I've had healers that I've gone through that with, Amy, and I know I couldn't have done that by myself. And they actually, like, working with coaches and working with the healers that I have, they actually brought me to stuff that was buried that I had no idea that actually existed. But once I figured out it was there, it made everything make sense to me. Like, there was a trauma in my childhood that I have buried. I still do not have full memory of it, but I know enough that it I can see how it played out through my entire life. I wouldn't have been able to tap into that myself. I needed somebody else to guide me through that. So my advice truly would be, if there are those things that have caused disassociation, which, they're pretty significant traumas, my advice is to have somebody to work through that with you, so that they can create a really safe space, a safe container. um, I mean, I remember being in those moments, in those meditations with those healers, and having them remind me over and over again, you're not there, you're not there, you're safe, you're okay, you're in your house right now, this is not actually happening to you. And that, out of, those intense processes, that's what I remember the most, them reminding me that I was very safe. So I don't know if that helps, but that's my personal advice, is to have a trained, whether it's a therapist, or a counselor or somebody, kind of walk you through those to reintegrate, because it can be tough. Any other questions, comments, thoughts about this? This is like, it's one of the components of my one-on-one coaching program. So it's something that I know is really, truly important to the entire process of, you know, moving your life forward and taking control back. This is a big part of it. Feeling those feelings, processing those feelings, and not shutting them down, because, once you do, they're trapped in there and they affect everything going forward. So it's really important to just take that time now to process it and give yourself that gift of taking care of it now, and your kids and your family. Like, again, that trauma has affected everything in my life. Oh, you're welcome. Um, and I don't know. I obviously didn't feel safe to do anything about it way back then, but if I had, a lot of things would probably be different. Not that I regret it, because I wouldn't be where I am today doing what I'm doing today. So I don't regret it, but I would hope that if something like that were to happen to one of my children, the process would look a lot different, and that they would feel safe to come to me with that. So, all right, I am going to leave you, lovely people. If you watch the recording, I would love to see a hashtag replay, and feel free to throw any comments in there. If you want to reach out to me directly, I'm always here. I mean it. So feel free to send me a message, and I'm happy to talk through anything with you. I hope you have a lovely rest of the day. Mwah! Love you guys.